have none.
Anybody on Zoom? All right. Approval of minutes from August 3rd. Do we have a motion? Motion made by Cornick. Second by Wolf. Any discussion? There being none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Motion carried. Resolution 20-24, creating section 203, amending section Saukey County Policy Procedure Manual on virtual attendance and standing committees, as postponed from the August 3rd meeting.
I think we should have the clerk explain this, why it.
This resolution was postponed at the last two meetings, as you well know, and because it was postponed, it had to be listed on the agenda. You know, you officially postponed it, so here it is on the agenda. But the next resolution is, what would you say, Jason, kind of like Rhonda's rewrite?
Based on the committee's comments.
Comments, right. So, I mean, I think what you can do with this is you could postpone it indefinitely, couldn't you, I think?
Or, yeah, or defeat it.
Or vote it down.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
Correct.
I don't know if you'd want to do that, or...
Somehow we need to
do away with it.
do away with it.
Right. So either we,
So, I guess postpone indefinitely.
Second.
second by Wolf, to postpone resolution 20-24 indefinitely because of the rewrite of the new one. Is there any?
Does that mean it'll never come up again unless we?
Indefinitely.
Not in this session.
We'll get into that too. We'll also address that.
Now we have to define this.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carried, postponed indefinitely. Next up, we have 20-35, creating 203.8, amending section 205, County Policy Procedure Manual, virtual attendance at standing committee meetings. That's a new resolution per committee direction. Motion made by Supervisor.
I'm not making a motion, man.
Oh, well, first we should have a motion on the
You
floor.
don't have to do that if you don't want.
Yeah, you could talk about it before you move.
It's different than the board.
Oh, good.
So I thought Rhonda rewrote this exactly what we wanted, which was to limit the attendance via virtual platform, whatever, to county board members of the various committees. And I was just going to suggest that under 2.05, there she is.
Yeah, Rhonda's here.
So Rhonda, I was just saying, what a wonderful job you did rewriting this for us on 2035.
Oh, good. I'm glad you like it.
Well, I thought it really captured what we wanted. And I kind of wanted to close the loop and make no room for confusion under 2.05 2A4, where the blue writing that Ron inserted, except when permission is granted to attend by teleconference pursuant to the provision in section 2.0 of the manual. So I wanted to insert behind granted county board supervisors, except when permission is granted to county board supervisors to attend. It kind of it restates what we're stating at the top, but it makes it very clear that that's all we're talking about here. Permission isn't going to be granted to anybody else. It's granted to county board supervisors in order to meet quorum.
Well, who would you grant permission to?
The
Janet?
chair. The
Yep.
chair.
That,
Right.
Sure, that makes sense, absolutely. You can never be too clear, so.
That's what I'm thinking.
Well, it could be, I mean, like staff or public, I mean, that's what you're trying to make sure it's not that.
Right.
Yeah,
That's your question. That's your question, Lee, is why you want to put in there. It's clear that it's not
Yeah,
staff.
it's, sorry.
Sorry, no, yeah, that's what, I'm sorry.
Yep.
No, that's fine.
Right?
So it pertains to supervisors only? That's what
Yeah,
you
and
want-
it
you want-
says that under 8A, 2.038A, may allow county board supervisors. I'm just re-emphasizing it to make it clear that that's all this is talking about.
So after granted, we would insert 2 county board supervisors?
Yep. To attend by teleconference, yes.
I think it's at least conceivable that we may have staff, you know, now that we've kind of started this process, there may be times when staff, you know, may be unavailable, but available to Zoom in, you know, and if that's okay with the committee, I think we would allow them to do that.
We did it the other day for plans, for Jason.
Correct, yeah, and I know it's very helpful for like human services when, you know, it saves Amanda you know, having to come to port and travel back and forth, so I think as long as the committee's comfortable with staff attending that way.
I think this policy would not stand in the way of that at all.
You know, the real challenge has been when we have both virtual and in person, and, you know, well, you've all been to a county board meeting lately, so I think you can understand that.
So, what's your pleasure, Marty?
I would move adoption of this with that addition. I don't know, I need to note that, or?
Yeah, you could do a motion to amend that.
Well, we see is we don't have a main motion anyways, because we don't do that at committee level. Couldn't you just say, you know, a motion to, you know, approve the resolution with the revised language?
So move.
If that's okay, Rhonda?
I think that's fine. We're pretty informal here,
Yeah.
so.
I think so.
You good?
I'm good.
Second.
I'll second.
Second?
Seconded by who, I'm sorry?
Don Square. His name and
I'm the one taking the blame. That's a responsibility here.
Any discussion on the corrected addition to resolution? Otherwise, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. Next up, Resolution 20-34, amending the section of Zocchi Policy Procedure Manual, County Supervisor defining a session.
So this was presented because, you know, the county board rules direct that items can only be brought up a certain, 2 times, is it 2 times per
Right,
session?
Twice per session.
Twice per session. As we looked at that, in relation to a unrelated item, we quickly determined that there's no definition of session of the County Board of Supervisors. So this basically creates language in the Policy and Procedure Manual defining session and defining it to be the term of the 2-year board term. We thought that was somewhat, that's certainly how I had always would have interpreted session to be, but, you know, there's many ways to interpret it, but we thought this was the most logical way to do it, to be the 2-year board term as session. I think a session could be a meeting, correct?
It could be a meeting.
You know, it could be a year. So, yeah, I think it's really up to the will of the committee and ultimately the board to determine the session, but I think logically it seemed to make sense that the session be the 2-year board term.
The issue first arrived because we were having problems with some parliamentary motions that hinge on the definition of session. And you could delve into the county board rules and sit and ponder what session meant when they drafted them. Did they even understood they needed to define session? Did they have a concept of what that was? They might have. And Julie and I have kind of pointed to different things in the county boards that suggested it might have been a meeting, but there's other things that suggest it might have been a longer period of time as well, such as 6 months based on Julie's old minutes. So it's really confusing. Long ago, they might have known what they meant by it, but we don't know what they mean today. So to rule on a parliamentary motion, certain motions, it's really difficult. So that's kind of what brought it to the forefront. That call to session that you have attached, I don't think it really gives you the wherewithal as to why it should be a year or 2 necessarily. I mean, they say about bringing business back and that sort of thing, but you can control that in other ways, such as our county board rule, indicating you can't do it more than twice in a year. But be that what it may, you know, I don't know what other to say other than take it from an experienced parliamentarian who's saying it should be a year or two, and just go ahead and make it a year or two. I've tried to reach out to my listserv to see if other counties had any insights into why it should be any particular length of time. The only person that responded was from Dodge County, and for them it was a publication issue for their clerk. There's a statutory deadline of after the session that the publication of proceedings has to be done. So to avoid doing it constantly, they had it like, I don't know, once a year. The session was once a year, then they publish at the end of the session once a year instead of every month. But Julie said she didn't care about that, so I didn't find any other insights from anyone as to why you do it one way or another. And we might learn as we go, and something else might surface. We could always change it.
Should be defined the way it is. Yes, Supervisor Wolf.
This does seem to make sense to me, even though it apparently is contrary to Robert's Rules of Order, which really would define our session as a meeting. But this does seem to make more sense, and then would allow us to do motions like we just did to postpone indefinitely, and that would, because otherwise, according to this, we couldn't even do a motion like that, is my understanding. If the session was a meeting,
Right.
then it's, yeah, so I guess this makes sense, and to me, this makes more sense than a year. You know, a session being our term, I think it's really specifically defined. The one thing I would say that if our county board rules currently state that, quote, no subject matter shall be voted on more than twice in the board year, I think we should change that to board session then, you know, so we have a consistent terminology, because I don't know what a board year is. Anybody know what a board year is?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, maybe a 12-month cycle, like
It could be.
we
but
brought
when
up in
does it
January,
start?
couldn't
When
do
does
it again
yeah,
in January.
Right. So I would think if we change that to, if we adopt this, then we should change the board rules to match that, so then we've got a consistent.
Aren't there some other session?
Right, I think that there, when Rhonda and I looked at the policy and procedure manual, like she said, there's several references to sessions that you can just substitute the word meeting in, you know. So that's all, we'll have to bring that back to make those changes. But then there's ones like closed session, and that's not, that word is used in that, in the way that is. But we are gonna look at the P&P, and we will be bringing back those changes you're talking about.
So there's be some housekeeping too.
Can I ask one question? So, as far as the budget, that's once a year, there would be no problem ever with that kind of, any situation with the budgeting process?
No, it shouldn't be. You only do the budget once a year. You don't fail the budget and then come back.
I was just thinking that budget's once a year, sessions once a year as the budget goes, you know, I mean,
Yeah, and I think in that case, we're statutorily required to pass a budget every year.
right.
So that language would.
I was thinking about the year being the
So
session.
just like Robert's rules can kind of set your base level for your meeting rules, you know, the county board can always put a rule on top of Robert's rules that's different or more restrictive. You can't go necessarily less restrictive, but same thing with the statutes. The statutes can obviously, you know, they can lay on top of Robert's rules or even county board rules. You know, we wouldn't say, well, we're not gonna follow that statute because we have a county board rule that's contrary to that, you know, that doesn't get us out of, yeah.
I just thought I'd bring it up, because it popped to my mind about,
Yeah.
could there be any?
Could we not pass could our rules cause us not to be able to pass a budget?
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
I think we'll be all right.
I think it's even been said in, I don't know if it's in this article or not, that Robert's Rules was not written for government. So, I mean, there are rules that are really good to use out of there, but it not necessarily doesn't fit in with everything that we do. And it's on the bottom of the chain of how your rules are.
Sounds good.
Mr. Chairman, I move we adopt Resolution 2034.
I'll second.
Second by Supervisor Milosek. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. on to 20-33, rules governing virtual attendance, standing committee meetings, and county board meetings.
So this language had originally been included in the resolution we tabled indefinitely today, but I think as we've moved through virtual meetings, we understand that there's a need for some rules to be put in place. So this was something that the clerk and the corporation counsel and myself worked on to put in place some rules when we are meeting virtually.
And Jason, is this intended to be temporary for as long as we're meeting virtually?
Isn't that language included in the?
Supervisor Wolf, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I had a question as to who
They would stay in place as long as there was virtual meetings.
this applies to. Does it apply to just the county board supervisors in the other, in the first resolution we addressed, 2035? Or does it apply to, as it says in the top there, the staff and public? I didn't think we were going to have public. I'm confused.
We're having it right now.
We do have it right now.
More or less for the now
So
situation.
this is to define the now, what we're doing right now. Okay.
It could be repealed altogether. I mean, I don't know if there's a need to have a rule, other than what we already have for the committee going forward permanently, to have anything more, because those are just more informal. At most, you'll have one, supervisor, maybe two attending virtually on occasion, I should think. And I don't know if there's a need for a long list of rules for that.
What if some supervisor attends virtual every time? No. They choose to just never come.
If the chairs give them people permission every time.
They have to look at the chair.
I suppose that could happen.
Some of these rules are in itself, are pretty generic to how a meeting should be run. A lot of them, the chair should be saying who made the motion and who seconded the motion, by name. So those are, some of these things, are pretty common rules, not necessarily being done, but they're pretty common. But now that we're virtual, I can't, as the minute taker, I can't always tell I can't always see or can't always hear. People wear masks, who's making the motion, or the public can't. Remember, we live stream this, so they don't know who made the motion or voted for and against something.
Under number 3, Mr. Chairman, I'm confused there too. It says, like B says, public comment will not be allowed during teleconference meetings. Well, if this is what we're doing now on the first and third Wednesdays of the month, we have public comment, not via virtual, but we do have public comment.
Where's this real come on?
Page 2, 3B.
3B. Yeah, 3B says public comment will not be allowed during teleconference meetings. During the meeting, but we ask for public comment prior to. Is that how you want that written, Rhonda?
Yeah.
Yes.
So this is public meetings where all county board members are attending virtually.
We're all, I got it.
If you have in person, then the public is obviously can join us in person to make public comment.
Yep, I missed that. Thank you.
The challenge with all virtual is, is just that.
Yep. Okay.
A good example of that, if you noticed at the top of the agendas, like for instance, Health and Human Services, the last 2 meetings have been all virtual, and they have that public comment link. But any other meeting, like today's meeting, does not have that. You can watch it, but you cannot comment.
If you'd like to comment to the committee, you need to attend the committee.
Right.
So that's just on for 1B3A.
You see it?
No, I see that. I'm saying is I'm looking at it's section 2B 3A. You see this part I'm looking at? That's a roll call.
When you're leaving the meeting?
Yeah. That's what, it's kind of confusing how we got all the A's and B's and C's and C's and all that. Anyway, so where it says, county board members leaving a meeting before a motion to adjourn shall announce their departure to allow the clerk to document attendance at the meeting. Are people doing that now when they just zip off?
Right, they're just off.
Absolutely.
They're telling you?
No, they're not.
So that's what I mean, okay.
That's why we have that.
Okay.
That's been one of the issues we're trying to deal with, people
Yeah,
come,
right,
people join midstream, and then they drop out, and then, you know, are they there, how do we calculate quorum, you know, what's the, you know, there's all kinds of ramifications that could happen, thankfully they haven't, but, you know, we need to know, especially for people who are attending virtually, we need to know when they're arriving, and then when they intend to leave, because, you know, we've had that, people that just, or they turn off their video, you know, and so now we don't know if they're in attendance or not in attendance. Yeah, so we would really like the board members to say, point of order, Mr. Chairman, I'm leaving the meeting, or I'm turning off my video even. You know, I'll still be listening, but I can't be seen right
Well,
now.
that happened to me one time. I lost the connection.
Correct. Yeah,
I didn't know, I didn't know what happened.
right.
And I'm sure Julie knew the same, didn't know what happened.
Yeah.
So this is for both in-person and, this is for a mixed meeting then, right? Not like number 3 where it's all are virtual, this is a mix. So then number 2 relates to those who are attending virtually then, right? Not those who are present.
Well, I guess that's a good question. People leave and don't tell us either, walk out.
It would probably be good meeting decorum if you walk in midstream to announce your presence and alert the clerk to say, you know, Mr. Chairman, you know, please note my arrival at 3:25 p.m. and let the minutes reflect, you know.
Okay, all right.
Even more departure, you know, because there are meetings where people start slinking out of there, grabbing their coffee, and ducking out.
Exactly.
Well, sometimes members will leave the room and we're not quite sure. Are you know, do you need to use the restroom? Did you get a phone call? Or are you in fact leaving the meeting so that we can, you know, note it as,
I know at the county board, last one, I had an appointment, I had to leave, and I told Lee and Julie both that I had to leave at 10:15 or 10:20 or something like that. So when I left, they knew I was leaving if we weren't done by then.
Yeah.
Which either way would be, I think, good for you to know.
No, I mean, if you're just getting up to go get a cup of coffee, as long as you're in the room.
Right.
And there's a vote, you're gonna have to come back and you're gonna have to take that vote. But by leaving the actual room, yes, we need to know so that we can, you know, continue moving on. Well, we're not gonna wait anyways, but you should be telling us that. And I can't see, I have a screen in front of me here that I can't see everybody, nor am I always looking to see who's still sitting there.
Well, in the past, I can recall times where we had to stop the meeting and try to count to see if we had a quorum, because people were leaving, you know, because they were
not sure if they were going.
That's what Paul and I
Yeah,
do
we and
up
I
there.
do that a lot, yeah.
Paul and I do that, there goes, we want to see where we're going.
So, yeah, I
Can't lose any more.
think that would be,
we've had meetings where people were marked present in their voting system and had left.
Well, that's true.
Left the premises.
Right.
And
That's where the issue.
now what do we do? You know, we have someone that's technically present and should be voting on this item, and has left Fort Washington.
People complain about the technology, well, no, it's not the technology's fault.
Sometimes no.
Sometimes. Operator here.
So if someone is gonna go to the restroom,
you should use point of order.
I tell Lee.
but then,
Well, I think, you know, even if you alerted the clerk somehow, you could walk up to the front of the room and say, I got a phone call, I gotta step out for 10 minutes. Right? I mean, you don't necessarily would have to, we don't necessarily want board members announcing to the world that they have to take a powder. You know, or I would say that, right, or requiring them to. But somehow the clerk needs to be made aware so that we can.
Now, I think we can do it with the voting system. And I'll look at that tomorrow, but I think there's a way that you can do it with the voting system, I gotta check with Tyler, that you can take yourself out of being present, for those that are in the room.
You know,
That messes something up? Well, we all found that out last time.
if people get an important phone call that they've been waiting for, and they have to dash out and get it, I mean, I get that.
Right. Yeah, that could be
So,
Unless, of course, you make a rule that you don't use your cell phones during the meeting, but.
There'd be no more donuts.
Yeah, we'll never pass.
No.
Hey, one more board meeting, wanting,
Well, if there's, you know, if you generally have somebody in the hospital and
so do we have, a motion for 20-33, are we all okay with it, the way it's written?
and again, this is gonna go for how long, until we change it back?
Right.
This is just, this is not in the policy and procedure manual, so it's just a rule that we're just gonna have, and everybody will have a copy of it, I guess. Right, Rhonda, we didn't.
Yeah, it's not set up for a corporation into the PNP here.
I think it remains in place. Well, there still may be virtual meetings. If 20-35,
Under e-voting on 2E voting, it says when a question before the committee are ready to be called, the chairperson shall inquire if the motion may pass by unanimous consent. So do we have to say to the whole committee, I mean, instead of saying, any discussion, hearing none, all in favor, or do we have to say,
Which number is that, Don?
I think,
E
of you voted,
one, I guess,
Top of page 5D.
Yeah.
number E,
E, okay.
number 2E, 1A.
I think
The
that
question
only-
before the committee is ready to be called, the chairperson shall inquire if the motion may be passed by unanimous consent.
That's only when you've got present and virtual, I think. This only applies when somebody's virtual. If everybody's here, like today, you don't do that.
Are you kind of requesting what does 2B mean in light of 1A?
Yes.
2B is a county board rule. 1A is a committee voting procedure.
Right, but I'm just saying, if I'm the chairperson, do I have to say, may we pass by unanimous consent, or can I say, is there any discussion, hearing none, all in favor? What's the difference?
I think it's basically the same.
Yeah, so
Basically-
why do it this way?
Okay.
Yes, I think that's.
I mean, do I have to be so specific, I guess is my thought, as a chairperson? Do I have to be very specific in the way I put it in order to get unanimous consent?
Is there a concern that the virtual
Instead of-
attendee wouldn't be heard?
I don't know why I didn't write that, but it seems a little more formal than it maybe would need to be, but, we have to make sure that everybody has a chance, if you do a regular motion, how many times have you heard it where you'll say, okay, all in favor, aye, and then you'll say opposed, and all of a sudden you'll hear somebody in the virtual world say aye, that came after the fact or whatever. I mean, I don't know.
Right, and then there's another part here where, in the same area, let's see, but I don't see it right now, but where it says that if somebody objects to unanimous consent, then we have to go to roll call. So, my thought was, where we're going with this, do we have to be so precise as to ask unanimous consent? Otherwise, we have to go to, clerk going for roll call. If there is no objection, okay, B says if there is no objection, the motion will be put to a voice vote. If, okay, if there are objections, the clerk shall conduct a roll call vote. That's what it says.
So then why would you need 1A, right?
What's that?
Aren't you just putting a motion out there? Right?
Yeah.
Like you normally do to a voice
Right.
vote.
Yeah, that's what we do.
I'm just trying to figure out if, as
What if you
as
just,
chairperson, how do I have to conduct
This
the meeting?
basically says if this is gonna pass 5-0, voice vote.
what if we
If
just,
someone's opposed to the motion, then a roll call vote
what
happens.
if we just struck B? Just
No, it
struck that line?
shouldn't change the way you run your meeting. You ask for a voice vote unless there's clarification needed.
Right. It's really for those times when you have people who are virtual and in person, right? Just like we do now. Everybody in the meeting, physically present at the meeting votes,
Right.
and then the clerk does a roll call vote. This would just say, is there unanimous consent to pass this item?
Oh, I get it.
All in favor, aye. Move on to the next item. It's only when somebody is planning to vote nay, where you would record their votes, then you would do a formal roll call vote.
So we don't have to inquire, as it says here, you shall inquire if the motion may pass. I mean, so I want to just do like I was doing, like all those in favor, and that's it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to inquire, I'm just going to do it. And then if it's not unanimous, then we take roll call.
So is there anything in here prohibiting that practice that Paul just said?
I wouldn't read it that way. I mean,
Either.
yeah.
All right, good, we're good.
Just remember to ask for opposed, which
Right.
is not always happening.
So remember, yeah, and always to the opposed, always remember that they're a little delayed, that's all, if there's somebody out. Last time it wasn't a problem because we were all here, but when Larson was here that one time, yeah, we were like, you can say yes.
Yeah, you have to remember the delay. That's very good.
Okay, so, let's say, I call a vote, right? And I go through, hearing none, all in favor, aye, and then opposed, I hear one. Because that person who's video conferencing doesn't really know how many people say yea or nay or whatever, do I just go to, okay, if somebody opposes it, do we just go to a roll call vote right away? Instead of just saying,
Not if you have a unanimous consent.
no, I'm saying,
No,
you
usually-
don't have that.
Well, usually you just say, well,
If one
all those
person
in favor
says
and
no,
Jason.
to clarify,
Yes.
do you go, okay, well, now we'll have a roll call vote? You know what I'm saying? So that everybody in the virtual meeting or in on the TV screen who maybe didn't hear quite, how the vote went, just, maybe I'm overthinking this, I don't know. Go ahead.
I don't know either. Because all those in favor, opposed, motion carries, right? So if there is opposition, then it goes to a roll call vote, right?
Possibly, but usually for my committees, I just said, okay, all those in favor except Supervisor Strong is against. And I announced it.
Okay, announce that, yeah, done that too. So in that case, that kind of would get rid of A on E1.
Right.
And even the first part of B, it would just be, standing committee voting procedures. The motion will be put to a voice vote.
Right.
If there are objections, clerk shall conduct a roll call vote.
Why don't you strike all of 1
Yeah, that's what I'm
and
thinking.
say voting procedure?
Strike the first clause of B.
Yeah.
Oh, you're just saying.
I'd say get rid of the whole, at the county board, you say, we're gonna call for the vote, everyone votes.
Well, this is standing
But
committee.
this is for
That's
standing.
standing committee, though.
I know, isn't it the same procedure?
No, because the county board uses a tablet to vote. Right?
Okay, so, after the members have physically attended, have cast their votes, the clerk shall conduct a roll call vote.
Oh, I know what you're saying. So you're just saying after you all say your voice
It
vote.
doesn't say how you do it. Aye, nay, tablet.
I get it.
I mean, the proper parliamentary response to inquiring if it may pass by unanimous consent would be for somebody, if they didn't want that, to say, I object. And then B and C tells you what to do if they object or don't object. So it all flows quite clearly here, and I think it helps the clerk ultimately when people are appearing by Zoom to keep everything straight. Would this do that for you, Julie?
Sure, I think it seems formal, but I think when you talk about it and you start thinking about it, so the motion's out there, does anybody have any objections to passing it by unanimous consent? And if somebody says.
No objection, then motion passes.
Put it to a voice vote, the motion passes or whatever,
That's-
or they object to
My
a voice vote.
question, that was my
That's how you start.
original question, do I
Is that what we have?
not say, you know, hearing no objections, or hearing that nobody wants to talk about it anymore, you know, all in favor, do I have to go, instead of saying all in favor, do I have to say, is there a motion can the motion be passed by unanimous consent? Is that what I have to say instead?
I would say, how would you like to do it? And then,
I just want to be correct, I guess, is my thought. If I have to change the way I put it, I don't have a problem with that, but going into my next meeting, I want to know which way I should go.
I think you would just say, are there any objections to passing said item by unanimous consent? If there are none, then you say, you know, all in favor, aye.
Hearing no objections, all in favor, say aye.
Yeah.
All right. So we have to.
So we're doing it at board too?
You already do this, Lee. You already do it just like this from when.
We don't necessarily do unanimous consent at the board level.
And you can't on resolutions and ordinances.
Right, you actually have to vote.
Right.
But I mean, they all have, you always just say, you know, we'll do a voice vote on the minutes. Now, if somebody objects, and it's in our rules, if somebody objects, they can call for a roll call vote, or they can call for whatever, you know, vote dates they want. Because just a voice vote doesn't necessarily mean that everybody said something.
We're gonna require our chairs to use the unanimous consent rule now?
That's what they're saying.
That's essentially the rule they're using already.
What's that?
That's essentially the rule they're using already
Really?
by taking a voice vote. I mean, Julie, do you always have a roll call if people don't agree with the motion? If there's somebody objecting to it, do you always take a roll call, or do you just writing down what people are saying?
No, you know, remember, we're not attending virtually, and we're not wearing masks,
Yeah.
and you know who they are, and usually the chair will say, well,
You can identify, there's only five.
it's 4-1, Supervisor Wolf opposed, or whatever, and then you know that.
Yeah, so, you know something, this should change nothing at most meetings, unless everyone starts attending virtually.
But it does,
If nobody's virtual, this shouldn't change it, because this is only for virtual meetings, where somebody's attending virtually.
Oh, sure.
It's to slow it down for virtual meetings.
Just so everybody knows that there's motion been made and who's voting how. Not only the clerk, but the people that are watching as well, whether they're on Zoom or whether you're in person. With masks and everything, you can't tell, you can't hear that.
Right, absolutely.
And the chairs have the decision as to whether or not you'll be meeting virtually.
True.
Right. So ultimately, the committee chairs decide whether or not. And it will only be, well, after October 31st, unless it's extended by the board, of course. You know, there will only be virtual meetings allowed to deal with issues of quorum.
I think it's cumbersome, though. I think it should just be, the motion will be put to a voice vote. If there are objections, the clerk will conduct a roll call vote.
That's fine, too.
Virtual attendance.
That's fine.
you know, it's just simpler, but if I'm the minority, I'm glad to go along.
Well, here's another question. Sorry about this, but.
Well, let's clarify it now.
Under C, number 2C, number 2, county board members, county staff, citizens appointees shall address the committee chairperson when wishing to speak, announcing their title, first name and last name.
That's
So
it.
do I have to say, you know, Don Cornick, District 16, would like to say something here?
That's a different policy. I think you're scooting ahead here on the agenda.
No, he's
Oh,
back on
oh,
page
are you?
1.
Okay. Oh, it is.
C2,
C2, okay.
or 2C2. 2C2.
Remember, these are for virtual meetings.
Yeah.
These are those that are attending virtually.
These are, so only the people who are attending virtually have to do that?
Well, that's what I was trying to define in number 2, but then we said it was good for everybody.
Well, I suppose it'd be nice if somebody sitting here, they would do that normal thing for not just everyone sitting here to make sure they know, but also for people on Zoom.
But Don's question is, boardroom, is that what you're asking? Or just committee?
I'm talking about any meeting.
Any meeting.
This is, because it says
Committee chair.
county board mayors, county staff, citizens appointees, so it can't be a boardroom, because citizens appointees, like on the Natural Resource Committee, he only has voting rights on certain
Correct.
subjects. So he has to address the chair with his name, title, his first name, second name, and title before when he wants to speak, okay? So if I wanted to talk right now, I would have to say, Mr. Chair, Don Cornick, District 13, would like to speak on this subject.
Well, if you
Correct?
go up to the
Is that
top.
what it says?
If you're in
It doesn't
virtual,
say that, but if you go to the top where it's resolved, Saukey County Board of Supervisors, the following meeting procedures are governed. A virtual meeting by county board supervisors, county staff. So that only, I would read it as that 2C is only virtual meetings only where you have to state your name and title because you're not sitting in a room.
Clarify that in the policy here.
Yeah, I think we need to, because really, if one of us
Yeah.
was virtual today, he'd need to do that, according to this,
Right.
even though he's sitting.
That's what I was kind of looking at, is because I may have one person, let's say Andrew, doesn't want to come to the meeting, so then the whole meeting has to go through this process in order to be clear. And I'm not complaining, and I'm not,
Well, that would
you
be
know,
kind of fun.
I just want to know the procedure I have to take.
And we haven't been doing that so far, I mean, that's for sure,
No.
right, so, no, not when people get in there and we've been talking.
Right.
But I mean, this is still basically just for clarification, so, because right now, I mean, I don't want to say we're flying by the seat of our pants, but I mean, when we have these virtual meetings, which we are starting to get a little better at,
Yeah.
you know, there's people raising their hands and you don't know it, and if they could interject their name in, so it would go into the minutes, you know, because otherwise, just having somebody talking up there, sure, we might all know them, but staff or the public won't know who it is.
But Lee, Don's saying too, though, when something's going on, and like we had something, when Jason was up there with the budget, and we started asking questions, every time we'd ask him a question, we'd have to say your name, title, and before you speak back.
but in a county board meeting, the chairperson does that. He says, Supervisor
Right, you-
Supervisor Meltech, you have a question? And then he recognizes the, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's.
You know, a similar thing happens at standing committee, you know. Supervisor will raise their hand, the committee chair will say, Supervisor Meltech, you have,
Yeah, in these virtual meetings, with the dead horse. But in these meetings, I look at, like I'm sitting there, let's say, and I look at the screen with me, with the committee on. Anybody who's watching virtually would have no idea if Melitik raised his hand without him saying something. You know what I'm saying? Because I can't see it. Because I've done it where I've looked at the screen watching for somebody to raise their hand, and I'm thinking, that person who's watching this virtually cannot see that person raise their hand. So they wouldn't even know who's talking sometimes.
Well, that's why, like you're saying, is that, I guess what we need to improve on is the committee chair needs to say Supervisor Larson, and then he starts speaking. You need to, the chairman needs to announce it, because sometimes, you know how it goes where, like just now, I started speaking without having really saying anything to me. So you'd have to make your meeting more formal and not just a free flow of back and forth like this, you know. I guess can we start right now?
You're hitting the nail on the head.
Yeah.
You know, the meetings can get real lax. You're not doing that. The chairmen are not doing that. The chairpersons are not doing that. And that's what you need to do. Get down to the basics so people know. The other thing is you don't live stream your meetings. You know, the public wants to attend their meetings, they come to the meetings. You don't have to live stream them. You know, this didn't change, because the meetings are,
Why do we start live streaming these meetings?
I think we started because they all went virtual right away.
To keep public from coming in person. They have to be open, so you have to give them a forum to.
There's certainly no requirement that we continue to live stream. We just never really had the discussion of, you know, whether that's a practice we want to continue. At one point, the board did have that discussion and said, don't.
Right, when we had all the equipment, we could do it.
When we had all the equipment we purchased to do it, they had ultimately decided, don't do it.
The building was closed and
Now it's
all
done
the
as a-
meetings were meeting virtually when it first started. That's why we started live streaming it. We had to have, by law, we had to have an opportunity for the public to attend.
We
Right, Ron?
continue to do it as basically as a convenience for people who don't have the, you know, if they want to go back and see what the executive committee did today, they could sit through the YouTube. And I know that there's at least a handful of supervisors that will do that, but.
The reporters are doing that too.
Hmm?
Although one did start attending he attended public safety and was happy to be able to attend.
So, going back to 20-33. I guess the question is October 31st, what happens?
We don't know.
Are we voting again if we're gonna extend it, or is it just done and?
Well, I think you have to decide what your.
Would that be executive committee, has that decision process, or?
I can't remember how that went to the board. It was modified on the board floor.
Well, isn't it that same one that's on the, Rhonda, wasn't it just the, same language that allowed them to be present, physically present, wasn't that what it was?
I think what they extended was the motion suspending the rules to allow alternative attendance.
Oh,
They extended that through October 31st, isn't that correct?
right, to
Was that
physically
the
present.
motion I made? Was that the motion I made at the meeting? And then,
Yes.
but then it got changed a little bit because Marchese went, he didn't want it to be where it just ended, to answer your question, he didn't want it to end automatically. He wanted to, you know, make it where we had a vote. Okay. Is that what
I didn't recall.
Right, so it was,
Supervisor Marchese made that amendment to what I was doing, or whatever. But
Because
they voted
originally-
mine down and put his in.
It was going to continue until the local health officer ordered otherwise, then somebody wanted to amend it until the county board decided otherwise, and then somebody's like, let's just make it October 31st.
But to vote on it again.
there was some discussion about having to go till the end of the year, so there was numerous things that were talked about.
But the final thing was basically, I was putting a date certain to it, and Marchese said okay to it, but he wanted it when we had to prove it again, or vote on it again, not just let it expire, I think is what he was.
Well, right now, it's telephonic and video attendance at county board meetings. Resolved by the supervisors that the suspension of section 2.05D11 of the P&P by resolution 20-6 approved on May 20th is hereby extended. And those rules were the meeting rules where the county board supervisors must be physically present to attend, participate, and vote. That's in our rules now. It has been extended to attend virtually until October 31st.
Why don't, you could put a sunset provision on this to October 31st then too, just, because you're passing this because we have that open to October 31st. I think that's what we're addressing.
Just approve a resolution that would allow for virtual attendance
At committee meetings.
at committee meetings. So
Right, but that's just like one or two people. And I don't know that, do we need this kind of formality because one person's attending virtually? A county board supervisor's attending virtually.
That goes back to your first question, because it seems like this applies to that, so.
I think the problems have arisen because we've had so much virtual meeting stuff going on, the county board floor, with committees where everyone's attending virtually, and then maybe 3 or 4 are. I think that's what's pushed this all to the forefront. But when all that goes away, and we're just occasionally granting permission to someone to attend virtually to get quorum, you might find this is a lot for just that situation.
Should this be changed to just virtual attendance at county board meetings and not standing committee meetings? But yet there's some good stuff in here. But there's too much stuff in here, it seems, for committee meetings.
Right now, my meetings, I'm not gonna let anybody just talk up, they're gonna have to.
Be recognized.
Be recognized. That's the only way I can see this working, because there's so many times that somebody just interjects something real quickly, and they don't feel like they want to, announce their name, but you're gonna clear it up, just tell them, you're gonna have to, every time you speak or sneeze, you're gonna announce your name.
As long as it isn't blinked.
Okay.
And then
No,
it'll
but
be,
you know what I'm
then it'll
saying,
be
though. I'm-
Supervisor Gordon Gesundheit.
All right, so what are we doing here with this one now? Resolution.
Well, if we adopt it the way it is, I guess my question is, we adopt this, it'll tighten up the meetings and make them easier for minutes to be taken and so on and so forth. I understand that side of it.
And for the public, if you're gonna continue to live stream.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it, I'm just looking for direction that, and the direction I see right now is that I'm gonna be very clear that nobody speaks unless they.
So it like I said, it tightens
And that's what we
it
do at the board meeting,
up. Well, exactly.
So,
People
all we're
just
doing is
don't-
carrying it over. Where we were a lot looser prior to this, that, everybody's in attendance and, and then,
So we
Julie's
don't-
gotta go, you guys gotta stop talking about this. Because we always leave the subject and go someplace else, because everybody just keeps talking.
Right. And Julie talked to me about this 5-6 years ago already. You gotta tighten up the committee meetings because it gets kind of
Yeah.
discombobulated and,
Freewheeling.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you could make them rules for any meeting, and then they would apply virtually or,
And then when it comes right down to it, it's up to the committee chair to do this. It's not up to the supervisors. It's up to the committee chair to say, hey, you gotta be recognized. You just can't be blurting stuff out and taking over a conversation when somebody else is talking.
Right.
Kind of like the way we were all raised.
But I mean, there is still a challenge at the county board level especially. for those that are attending virtually. You know, I mean, I don't see them, I can't see them over here, they're off to the side. And Jason shouldn't have to be sitting here wondering who's in, who's not, and then he's got things to do too.
The difficulty that comes in there, yeah, they're up on the screen, they're raising their hand.
That's where they say, point of order, Mr. Chairman, or I would like to speak, right?
Or they're messaging me in Zoom, or they're sending me an email, or some of them are texting me saying, I want to make a point, you know.
Yeah, they can't be,
It's not the smoothest process in the world. Although we tried to establish that with the first meeting when we said you'll email your votes in and et cetera, that quickly, you know, we still had people texting and.
which brings me to the point of the October 31st, if this goes away, that's where the biggest problem's in, you know. Because you can't send me a text. Paul knows there's way too much stuff going on up there for me to go, you want to be recognized? Oh, that was 25 minutes ago.
According to Trump, this is all gone on November 3rd.
Not getting carried away here.
Yeah.
Stay off the subject.
So,
Mr. Chairman, Jason Zunel, County Administrator.
yeah. So,
Where are we going?
Let's
I
go
guess
somewhere.
it's up to the committee. I mean, I'm okay with this. It's up to the committee chairs to just tighten up their meeting, and also we'll work on it on county board when people are on the screen. Because if I had the ability, if I had a screen right there where I could see people, that would be one thing. But I don't. They're off to the sides. Suppose we could maybe turn the screen a little bit. That works.
But I don't think it's just that either. You have people watching. People need to speak up, to say something like, point of order, you know, Supervisor Reed, I would like to speak to this, whatever you're talking about. And and you hear it, and everybody else in the room hears that there is somebody else that wants to speak, and the public hears it.
As far as me hearing something, that's a challenge, because I can hardly hear you most of the time right now, so, you know, it's bad. Supervisor Wolf.
Mr. Chairman, I would propose that we move this for adoption with the following modifications. We strike 2E1A. So we strike out when the questions before the committee are ready to be called, et cetera. And then the first clause of B. So then E, voting, standing committee voting procedure would be A, the motion will be put to a vote. B, if there are objections, the clerk shall conduct a roll call vote. That's my motion.
I'll second that.
I'm sorry, could you just, I know the second part, could you just repeat the first part?
Sure, so what it's changing this, so getting rid of A, under standing committee voting procedure, under voting E, 1A. Get rid of A, and get rid of the first part.
Yeah, no,
of
that
B.
part I heard, but what was the other part you talked about?
Well, I just kind of re-summarized it, so
Okay,
that
so that's
standing
the-
committee voting procedure would be essentially A, the motion will be put to a voice vote. B, if there are any objections, the clerk will conduct a roll call vote.
Okay, good.
So now we're just on voting procedure.
Yeah, that's it. So I'm saying, a motion to adopt this with that modification.
And with the second.
So you're, so we're
So I am not giving him a nameplate.
Don't make a telephone meeting.
striking,
Supervisor Clark would like to address the committee.
striking 1A, is that what you're striking?
Yeah, striking 1A in the first 5 words of 1B. The first clause.
If there are no objections.
Yeah, right. So it just
And
becomes.
1A completely out.
Yep. So 1A becomes the motion will be put to a voice vote. And 1B becomes, if there are no objections, the clerk will conduct a roll call vote. And that'd be it under 1.
Anybody have a problem with that, with the correction there? You have a second to that already? I'm sorry.
I did second.
Second, all right.
I make a roll call vote every time.
If there's objections. Otherwise, it's a voice vote like it always is, you know, I mean, pretty much the same thing. Guess you would be doing a roll call only if,
Are we getting rid of if there are no objections in B?
well, I guess that isn't gonna make sense then, because if you say the motion will be put to a voice vote, if there are objections, but then that would be, if you're putting it to a voice vote, how would you know the objections? They're voting no. Then you might as well just put it to a voice vote then, or a roll call vote.
Well, Mr. Chairman, what I'm envisioning is, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? The room is silent. Motion carries. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Nay. Okay, now we have a roll call vote. Which is kind of what we're doing now, although I would point out, as you guys point out, Supervisor Zwindell voted no. Essentially, that is a roll call vote.
Roll call vote is Supervisor,
Yeah, every name.
Supervisor Clark, aye.
You know, voice vote doesn't necessarily mean that everybody in the committee said something. They may not have.
Correct, you don't want, you're saying yes or no.
Right.
So then, so in other words, are we doing this to clarify so we know exactly who voted no?
I think it's,
No, I don't think so. I think what we have to do is, like where we go, if there's one nay vote, the chair would say, motion carries. And
just say, I
that's
would,
when the person who may have put the nay vote up says, I object, or point of order, I would like to take a roll call vote.
right, which you can always make that you can always make that point of order. What did it say? When the questions before the committee are ready to be called, the chairperson shall put the motion to a voice vote. A. B, if there are no objections to the voice, if there are objections to the voice vote, the clerk shall conduct a roll call vote. Right?
Yeah, we could change
You're
it.
basically saying, committee chair says, where are you going, Paul? No.
Mr. Chairman, I need to get a bottle of water.
Okay.
I said he's not leaving the room, he's okay to do that.
You don't have to tell us that.
What if instead of unanimous consent, you said, when the questions before the committee are ready to be called, the chairperson shall put the motion to a voice vote?
Yeah, that's what Jason said, yeah.
Right. If there are objections to the voice vote, the clerk shall conduct a roll call vote. I guess that could be, it's a contentious issue, and a board member would like every member to voice their vote.
Right, they have that right.
You could do that now, right?
I'm okay with that.
You're okay with that? Everyone okay?
Let's just make sure we have this right. So when the questions before the committee are ready to be called, the motion will be,
The chairperson shall inquire if the motion may, instead of passed by unanimous consent, be put to a voice vote.
The chairperson shall put the motion to a voice vote.
Yeah,
I
that's
think we
right.
want to inquire, because you want to ferret out the objections, right? Isn't that the problem we're running into?
No, we just wanted to put it to a vote. That's
Yeah,
what I wanted.
then B becomes, if there are objections to the voice vote, the clerk shall conduct a roll call vote.
You're going to wait for the nays to come in, and then,
Oh, you're just saying, yeah,
I think by the time you wait for the nays to come in, most of the time you're going to know who was a nay and who wasn't. And then it's going to feel like you're going through a lot of extra steps to.
no,
Reduce the steps.
someone could vote nay in a voice vote, but the only time you would call a roll call vote is if a member of the committee wants every committee member wants their vote individually on record, right?
Or the chair.
Or the chair.
Or the chair.
Okay,
Chair
I see what
is
you're saying.
concerned
All
that
right,
he or she did not get a,
okay.
This is a contentious item, let's have a roll call vote.
And
When the questions before the committee are ready to be called, the chairperson shall put the motion to a voice vote. And
If there are objections to the voice vote, the clerk shall conduct a roll call vote. I don't know that it's ever happened, but now we got a rule for
You
it.
gotta have the option.
You always have the option.
yeah, you've always had it now, at the board, or any,
Any time, any committee, any board member, any board meeting, you can ask for a roll call vote.
geez,
I think we should do it on this one.
The question.
3-1-1 or something.
Or it's majority.
So do you have the information you need, Julie?
right, so it's gonna be 1A, when the questions before the committee are ready to be called, the chairperson shall put the motion to a voice vote. If there are objections, does that have to be B then?
Yeah.
If there are objections to the voice vote, the clerk shall conduct a roll call vote. Is that right?
Good?
Good to me.
Good, good, good. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? There being
No objections?
no objections, we will have
Getting practice in.
Next up, discussion items, draft rules regarding public comment on county board standing committee. Once again, I will reiterate what I said earlier, when 5 or 6 years ago, Julie said we need to tighten this up because it's got a little out of hand, so.
And we've sort of played a little bit fast and loose, a little bit more as of late. You know, I think the biggest no-no is having county board members speak under public comment, because that, you know, they should only be addressing items that are on the agenda. So these are some rules that Corporation Council drafted, for your consideration and discussion, and then I think the intention would be to bring something back to make a formal policy going forward. I don't know if you have anything to add, Rhonda?
I'll just say a couple things about it. I've been trying to pressure everyone to consider, you know, what should be allowed in terms of topics and public comment. The reason being, we've kind of had an episode where there was a lot of discussion about things not on the agenda that was rather contentious. And I just imagine myself being a member of the public. I'm coming to speak in public comment about something that's on the board agenda. And now I'm sitting there for 25 minutes while people talk about anything under the sun, and I'm just there about something on the board agenda. So I'm waiting around for a long time. Supervisors who are elected, taking time off of work, are waiting around for a long time about things that aren't on the agenda that could, you know, be brought to individual supervisors by their constituents. And I think that the cleanest public comment policy would limit public comment to items that are being considered on the agenda that day. That would be the cleanest way to do it. It would take a lot of potential for getting sidetracked about issues that A, aren't on the agenda, and B, aren't even county business at all. To limit to agenda items, because even, I tried to limit it somewhat in number one by saying, you know, the purpose of the policy is to give members of the public a chance to comment on matters over which the county board has authority. The problem with that language is, how do you, in the moment, decide this is an item we have authority over? There's an AG opinion on whether or not you can, I think, donate to a private food pantry or fund a private food pantry or something like that. I mean, so is that county business something a county can do or not do? It took an entire AG opinion to research and address that. So it can be difficult in the moment to decide this is county business or not. So I think the cleanest public policy or comment policy would simply be to limit public comment to items on the agenda that day, respect everyone's time, all the supervisors, all the public that's present, staff that's present, presenters that's present, you know, to keep meetings tightly to the business agenda that you have. That's my suggestion. And I say that because of the type of meeting we had recently. I'm concerned about it. I think there's a lot of potential for a lot more of that in the future. We had a contentious item on the agenda in January, and that's more of an issue of how do things get on the agenda. Should they have to go to committee first before they go, you know, pass to the board floor, you know, to vet them, you know, kind of ferret things out. And we had a lot of public commenters there that day, ultimately on an item that, you know, kind of became known to be not county business. So that's a separate item to address, you know, maybe cleaning up the policy for bringing items to the agenda. But I just think it's really important in this day and age, kind of the prevalent attitude out there that the county board floor is a place where you come and say what's on your mind. And I don't think that's the case. So I think we got a representative form of government. You all have your offices, your phone numbers, your emails. You can be contacted by the public for anything that somebody might want to talk to a supervisor about. This opens up the door for them to talk to all their supervisors, the ones that represent them and the ones that don't.
We have had at least one member of the public comment following a recent meeting that, what's going on at your county board under public comment?
Yeah, it was like a free-for-all. I mean, he wasn't impressed with it, so.
And we're live streaming, so you can watch it over and over again.
So can I ask, until I'm clear, does this, what's on here, board rule right now, is this what we already have right now?
We have no public comment.
Basically, only number 3.
And it's in the agenda section of our PMP.
And we don't even adhere to that.
We generally do not adhere to that, correct?
So I kind of drafted this, I think, based on the discussion we had last time, because we did have some discussion on it.
Yeah.
And so I tried to sort of follow that overall while still sort of put my thoughts on paper in terms of what would be good ideas here.
Chairman Summer.
Yes.
So what you have here, so what you're saying is the first part, one, now, Ronnie, you'd like to change it, you would think that matters on the agenda, for which the county has authority, and is on the agenda or something like that, or is that what you're saying? Do you think that maybe we could revise it that way?
Yep, I could. If people were open to that, I would do that, to further narrow it to items on the
Do you
agenda.
think that, if we did it that way, there could be some protest in a way, public protest, that you basically are shutting out conversation because you're only limiting it to what you won't let us speak about the things that are very important to us or something?
And what I'd say to that is, nope, not shutting out opinions or, things that people want the county board to address, but they need to approach their supervisor about that first.
And that's what I thought. I just like that. And then, so, any of this kind of stuff, like say, time allotted to public comment shall not exceed, do we need to write in there that at the chairman's discretion, that could be overruled, or is that always just the case anyway?
That's always the case,
Okay.
yeah. Somebody can make a motion to suspend, and we need to be consistent and actually do that.
Well, because, because to lose the fence, I think, and my personal thought is that he gave latitude to the last situation because he thought it was the proper way to go, and to alleviate any stress on the situation. I mean, I know there was stress. He thought it would have been more if he would have limited it, like this. So, I think, right? I mean, that's.
Well, it was a touchy situation.
Yeah, he was trying to handle it diplomatically, is what I think.
Right.
So, and then, does this specifically state that a county board chair or county board member cannot speak during public comment? It doesn't say that specifically anywhere, does it?
It says in the purpose, what the purpose of it is for, to allow residents of the county who are non-county board members an opportunity to address the board.
Okay, so it says right there, so, I mean, like last time, Jeanette was speaking, and then Lou got in there and asked some questions back and forth. So, I guess it says that to provide non-county board members. I don't know if I guess that's.
We can certainly be more explicit and say county board supervisors shall not speak under public comment, if that's the desire of that's the desire of the committee.
It does say, county board members wishing to ask questions for clarification or assistance in understanding comments presented must address their inquiries to the chairperson.
Okay.
So it does address a little bit county board members, but it doesn't place a prohibition on them talking in public comment, but public comment is basically defined. And this would give Lee then the power to enforce that, say, well, the purpose of our public comment session is not for county board supervisors to express their opinions about things, it's for the public too. So you'll have an opportunity to talk about that in debate. Again, if we limit items to what's on the agenda.
But as I think this through, we probably want to bring this back in tandem with the process for getting items, the proper protocol for getting items on the agenda, because I don't think we want to say, you know, you can only talk about things on the agenda, but what's the process to get something on the agenda, right? We want to make sure that that process is also clarified, because, yeah, I don't think we should do one without the other.
No,
Right, because I think if you, this is limiting in some respects, right? So we want to make sure that we at least address the process for bringing items forth.
The other thing I should interject here is, let's say Supervisor Smith says, my wife is in charge of, I don't know, United Way, and they're having a fundraiser. We need to convey to supervisors to get that message to me, and I'll do it under communications. Right? I mean, that would be the proper way to do it, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends on what it is. You know, you want to open communications up to anything under the sun, too. If somebody has
Because
something.
in the past,
Yeah, I mean.
supervisors said, hey, you know, not even their wife or whatever, they're on a committee, and they said, hey, we're having a fundraiser for, I mean, where are we gonna draw the line? Are we gonna make this
The golf outing or?
The golf outing or the
jail literacy
program.
things that we're all involved in, that the county's involved in?
Yeah, because that's coming up during public comment. You know, this is a very conservative viewpoint, but in the webinar we watched, the WCA presenter was of the mindset that that could violate the ethics code if you're promoting an organization or something with through your county board seat. You know, this is county board time. I'm sitting here as a supervisor, and now I'm going to use this platform to promote this organization. You know, it's interesting, and we talked to a private attorney about that recently because we had to talk to somebody about an issue that arose. And I talked to her about it, and she thought that was way too conservative of a viewpoint. I mean, I kind of understand where the WCA presenter is coming from. You know, where does it cross the line and become an ethics issue? But in any event, it doesn't belong in public comment. So the question you want answered is whether or not you could put it forth in another area of the agenda, such as communications, that sort of thing. You know, I think communications, you know, could be, you know, Julie, I don't know, maybe you would do this when the clerk has a chance to talk, you know, about the county board Christmas parties coming up on such and such a date, that sort of thing.
Don't forget to put in your county's association registration for the committee.
Yeah.
There has to be a way to communicate some of these informal things. I think that the ethics issue comes in is, you know, I'm promoting something that this is my son's organization. You know, he's running Big Brothers Big Sisters Ozaki County, and you know, if he raises $20,000 this year, he gets a bonus or something. And I know that, and I'm saying everybody needs to come to this.
I don't think that belongs.
Big Sisters fundraiser. You know, that I'm saying there's a member of my immediate family I'm using my position on the board to benefit himself financially, right? If you're saying come to the jail literacy fish fry at Fire Ridge, because we're trying to raise money for, and it's a not-for-profit board, yeah, there has to be there should be a mechanism for communicating some of these informal.
Couldn't that be at the end of the agenda after, you know, where, you know, we got committee reports usually, one of the last things in adjournment, couldn't there be a, you know, just a session then?
Or you put it under communications, because generally under communications, we don't, you know, there's a communication from the jail literacy.
Right.
That kind of stuff makes
Bantering
sense
back
to me.
and forth about what's.
Here's a letter to the county board reminding you of the jail literacy fundraiser. That's it.
Yeah.
You know, you're not.
I'm just
It's
doing.
it's also in the agenda. It's in the agenda packet. It's written in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. I mean,
You're not really promoting any.
I understand where the WCA presenter is coming from, because why at the county board meeting would you advertise all the community events you're involved in and associated with? I mean, it makes no sense on some level that you would do that, but something like, yeah, the jail literacy, that's county stuff. I mean, things like that, county business, you know, somebody might want to praise the health department, they could send a letter, you could present that communications that we received this letter, you know, that kind of thing. But I think it should, again, be really germane to county business, not, you know, things people just want you to know about, so maybe you'll go attend them. I don't think that's appropriate.
I think part of the department too is like sometimes, like, it could be pretty non-confront, a non-issue when you say something. So sometimes like about something, what we're doing, where it's nobody's mind, right? But then you say that, and then the next one is like, oh, and, here's some information on redistricting I want to put in here, or the next, or we got a march on Port Washington on Saturday, and we're going to be going in, or some type of event going on that keeps moving.
Here's why you should support the Green Party candidate for president.
Yeah, exactly.
See what the county.
Probably it's not a communication that would belong in a county board packet. Now, if you would like to mail out a letter or email every county board member, by all means, you can do it, right?
What should a county board hear? I mean, that's,
What's appropriate.
yeah.
And what's germane to county business and functions.
Do we have anything under here about distributing material?
Yeah, no, that's one thing I want to bring up too, because sometimes people just throw stuff on your desk.
No, I didn't, because it happened one time. It happened one time, and I feel that it's so obvious you can't just walk onto the county board floor, that bearing that in our public comment or public attendance comment policy, we can add it, but I don't think anyone's going to be aware of it. I don't think it's going to make a difference. I've seen that one time in 8 years going on. It was totally inappropriate.
Well, we stop them, so, the papers say no, you can't do that.
Right. I think it'd be better to put a sign there, public, must remain seated behind this point or something like that. I think it'd be better to post a sign.
Well, because when you start distributing items in a public meeting, you're creating a public record, right?
You're disrupting the meeting.
Well, but you're also creating a public record, so now you want to make sure that if that happens, it's part of the.
And it just happened recently.
Yeah,
There's been a couple of times, Rhonda.
Is there? Did somebody walk up?
Supervisor,
Recently it did.
if
Within
we're
the
in
last month.
deliberation, and the supervisor brings pictures of Mole Creek.
Yeah, which has happened, or,
That can be distributed because that is part of the deliberation, because he wants to give you evidence of what Mole Creek or picking. I'm not picking anybody in, I'm just clarifying.
and then I think in that one specific case, it was under that item.
You're getting permission to do it too.
The risk is when you're just kind of laying a blanket communications policy and letting anything flow to the board.
Well, that's another question too. Is a county board member distributed or is somebody from the public distributed?
Right, and ultimately, even if a board member distributes something, the public has a right to inspect those photographs,
Public record.
right? If it's distributed during a meeting, it's a public record.
Well, certainly, yeah. I mean, it's now in the possession of a county board supervisor, so, arguably it's a public record.
They're the only ones that have it.
So I guess what my question would be, do you want us to bring this as it is back next month, shape it a little bit more in a certain direction? Do you like my idea of limiting public comment to items on the agenda, for instance?
What's the feeling on that?
I think, yes, bring it back next, and also, like Jason said before, you can't bring one without the other,
Bring them both,
which is
okay.
even more important.
Do you want me to make any changes, or bring it back as is, and you can amend it, be prepared to amend it next time?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Please say your first and last name.
He's smart. So, under number 3, we don't need to say unless the chairman extends it or whatever, because he has the power to do that anyway. Is that correct?
Well, the board,
I mean, if the chairman
with
decided.
a 2/3 vote of the board, you can override any county board rule. Basically, would be the formal way to do that. Yeah.
The formal way, though, it's not just saying we're gonna suspend the rules. It has to be a motion and.
I think the question is whether you think 3 minutes per issue, 3 minutes per speaker and 12 minutes per issue is sufficient to.
Yeah, and I was wanting to potentially give the chairman some latitude there that he could decide to extend it.
If that's your rule.
Then that puts him in a political type
It kind of does.
spot there, yeah.
By giving him something, now he's on the hot seat. Maybe okay. All
I've
right.
been there before, it doesn't bother me.
Yeah, but if you,
Until you're there again.
Somebody and not for another. another.
Yeah, okay.
But I think it also gets to the concept of, and then we talked about this recently at a Public Works meeting, you know, if things are becoming redundant, you know, if the point has been made,
And that's on here.
saying the same thing again and again and again doesn't necessarily, you know.
And I'm torn on the agenda only or matters which we have authority. I kind of go both ways on that.
I planted seeds, so you could spend a month thinking about it.
Okay, that's a
And
great-
reflecting, and maybe watching a past meeting or two or something, or listening to them, or.
Because on the one hand, you know, I want public input. You have articulated that there are other ways for public to get their input to us directly. So I don't know. I'm torn on that. The last thing is on committee rule number 2. Do we want to add there that county board supervisors that are non-members of the committee may speak during public comment on any item noticed on the agenda for discussion or action? Or, do we want to add something like, or at other times when recognized by the chairperson? Because I'm thinking there are, you know, items come up on the agenda that, well, that's my question. Do we want to add something like that there or not?
I think that should be added. I'd like to see that. It's just because I haven't done a lot, to be honest, I haven't gone to a lot of other committees other than my own. But I recall one time I went, Supervisor Winker and I went to a committee, and it was the big issue going on, and it didn't seem appropriate speaking in the beginning, but we wanted to speak later. And we actually, I mean, I guess, I don't know if we were recognized anyway, but.
Problem with that is, if you're doing it during debate, you're blurring your role. You're not a member of the committee, and now you're participating in debate.
Okay.
And that's the problem with it. It's
Well, what if
what's the
the
problem
chair
with
wanted to
that?
give
If
us,
the chair-
ask us for information or.
That's different.
Or
Mhm.
something.
And not, as opposed to you choosing, this was carved out so that you could come and speak on an issue. So during debate, you would not say, hey, I'd like to mention something, or, you know, but if you want, if the chair wanted to ask you a question or something, sure.
Well, what's wrong with that, Mr. Chairman?
Because they're not a committee member, and the committee was appointed to debate this resolution and come up with a decision here, a recommendation on it. And if you just allow any member now to come in and be a part of it, you don't have a committee doing it now. You have-
But I disagree, because the committee is going to vote, and the committee's vote is what's going to carry that forward, regardless of the debate. I mean,
Yeah, but your opportunity is gonna come at the board meeting.
Yeah, exactly.
well, but I'm kind of looking to streamline that. I'd rather have the debate at the committee level than at the board level. You know what I mean? But.
Well, then without creating a walking quorum, you know, well, first of all, you could speak in public comment, air it out, get out your opinions about why the policy should be one way or another. But without then creating a walking quorum, you could also maybe talk to a committee member beforehand, one committee member as opposed to 3 committee members, for example, and express some thoughts too about it. You know, maybe then that committee member could bring those points up as well in debate.
You're contaminating the debate
Yeah, that's right, I think you
by
are.
interjecting.
I unfortunately have a 5 o'clock meeting I gotta run to.
Oh, sure.
Versus having 4 people sitting there and, you know what, I can.
I got to figure something out. Just to get that cleared. Jason couldn't make up his mind about when. So I got this screwed up, because we were changing from 1 year, then we were going for 4 payments.
Do we want to just put this off to next month, finish this?
No, I think it's good, just to make sure that.
Oh, this you're talking, I meant this, I meant the rules.
Oh, just let me know if there's
And if
anything
you,
more.
and if you say something,
You can watch the stream.
if you say something in public comment, all right, and it wants to be clarified by the chairperson, you can come back and ask you about that statement, correct?
Yeah.
Chairperson can call on
Yep.
anybody in the meeting.
Right. So you do have that opportunity, but if you're going to, if you want to debate it, it would be at the board meeting.
Didn't like what I was gonna, I thought I meant to say.
That's only if it passes, right? I mean, the only chance you have to debate something at the board meeting
But
is
you
if the
can,
committee passes.
well, you can put it on the agenda though, right?
We gotta talk about that, how things get a little more, tighten that up, because, yeah, we've already talked many times as a board that a committee doesn't defeat something, you know, only the board does. So if somebody, if there's will to put this resolution on the board floor, it still could go there. I think you can handle it from here today,
Yeah.
but I got my cell phone with me.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Well, I'd
Let the
still like to
record
see-
show.
I'd still like to see that added to two.
Yeah, I guess I understand you guys. Yeah.
All right, well, we have the draft.
Okay. Can I just say, one other thing though, like, with, Rhonda said about part one, so we did, about the board has authority or on the agenda, I think we're gonna discuss that now or wait, I mean, that, we're gonna change that to, what is, instead of to comment on matters that are on the agenda as opposed to over which county board has authority. We talked, so we're gonna change that, like Rhonda suggested. I think that is troublesome.
Kind of torn by it. She seemed to indicate that we think about it and decide next time.
Well, I guess we'll see what happens with the rules on how some gets on the agenda.
Yeah.
We'll wait. Moving on.
Okay. Draft rules regarding public comment on Sunday, what's it? Anything else second here? Strategic plan.
I think it's time to tee up the strategic plan. You know, I think we came off a pretty successful launch of our OSmetrics, our performance measures thing. I think it was pretty well received at almost every committee. So I would propose that we have a resolution to come from the executive committee to begin, formalizing the strategic plan. I think so we can begin the work at the committee level. I think we have to keep that in mind. That this was when this committee selected Better to Ask Faster, they did it so very purposefully. I think you only need to look as far as the title of the consultant who did the plan. That the committee preferred a sort of down and dirty, let's get the ball rolling approach, and I think that's where we are, and I think it's time to move that process forward. So there can be tweaks and changes. I think those should properly happen at the committee level where they're overseen. But again, I think married with our performance measure exercise that we're beginning on, we can really start down the path of doing some strategic thinking at the committee level. So that's what I have on that. And I think a resolution from the executive committee, kind of establishing those 5 high-level areas and directing the committees to do the work, would be a good place to get the ball rolling. And then we can get into the wordsmithing and doing all those things at the committee level versus at the board level, and where things tend to get a little bit bogged down.
Right. Kind of get into weeds once in a while with that. Supervisor Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I really agree with this, and we talked about it a little bit. I want to make sure that the resolution doesn't imply or affirmatively states that by adopting this strategic plan, we're not saying yes to all these components of it. Yeah. Because
Which is why you call it a plan.
Exactly, because I don't want this brought back and say, well, the board approved this, item
Or
3.
All
C, D.
buildings have to be white.
Right. There are things in there that I'm not sure we really want to do, but they're put out there. And, yeah. So can we make sure that the resolution reflects that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think again, we're at a beginning point, and we have to begin somewhere.
Yeah.
I think we've done a lot of work, and there was a lot of time and effort by board members and staff to do this work, and ultimately, I think it should come from the committees up through this committee and then out to the board. So
That'd be great.
we'll bring that forward.
Can you give us an update on the budget for 2021, please?
I'd love to. It's coming along very nicely. We've had good news from almost all of our departments. Our health insurance came in very positively. We had assumed a 10%. It came in at 3% renewal. Our finance committee accepted that and directed us to proceed with that. We're not anticipating any plan changes, with the exception of adding a fourth tier of coverage, which would be for single employees who have more than one children. So it actually drops the rate for those people a little bit. You know, we actually have 35, 36 people who are eligible for that. I was surprised to hear it was that many in number, you know, even out of, that's less than 10% of our insured employees, but it's something that we had with our previous insurer, and when we switched back to the Group Health Trust, we lost it. So we made those changes. We've assumed a 3%. There's a 2% wage increase in the budget, and I think, the other thing, the other kind of big policy item that we're going to work on and present to the executive committee ultimately is, we have departments like our special revenue fund departments, like human services, public health, and in some cases highway, where they've really developed a pretty high levels of departmental reserves. And we'd like to discuss with the committee how we might leave them with ample reserves to run their operations, but take some of those reserves and use those to fund our debt service levy and provide the taxpayers with a property tax decrease over this budget, the next budget, and then in 2023 we have some pretty significant debt levies that are dropping off. So I think we'd like to craft a strategy where we give people some property tax relief. Obviously, in these departments with large reserves, we've over levied a little bit, so we want to make sure they have enough to do their business, but we'd like to return some of that back to the taxpayers. Then we can adjust our debt levy, and it won't impact us on the operational side in terms of the property tax net new construction calculation. So that's something that we'll work on. We're putting the final touches on that. We'll present it at the mid-month meeting this September, and then have a full discussion with that and with the committee in October when you finalize and review the budget. So, but I think the goal is to take some of these reserves and provide some property tax relief over the next couple of years. I think the time is right to do that, and we'll move forward with that. So,
Mr. Chairman, I think that's a great idea.
Awesome.
I wholeheartedly agree with that idea.
Obviously, we never like to use reserves to offset operations, but I think we have some flexibility, and looking forward into seeing some of that debt that will drop off in coming years. I think the timing is appropriate. We won't be committing ourselves to do something over a number of years, but just a couple of years until some of that debt falls off.
We did talk about that with that sales tax issue too. Is that all be part of that strategy?
Yes.
Sales tax refund that we're going to look to
refund the extra Miller Park sales tax. Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Did you ever get a number on that?
No, we have not yet. So.
Do you have any idea what it would be?
I think it's about $200,000. Yeah. Just based on what the overage was, and they're paying it out on a per capita basis. So it'll be right in that range.
David Vac.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think now would be a good time to give the public a bit of property tax relief.
I think we've come through so far this year, we've come through the COVID thing pretty good. From the worries that we had, I think people stayed home more and did repairs to their houses and things, and it really reflected in these sales tax, which obviously goes directly against the levy.
Yeah.
So we should do it.
Our June sales tax came in right on budget. We're a little bit behind where we were last year, about 20,000, but generally we do kind of gather steam. So we're halfway. We're only 22,000 under budget, so we would anticipate, we see a lot of stability there that we weren't anticipating in sales tax collections.
We budgeted for $7-8 million, what?
About $9 million this year. Yep.
So a budget of $9 million and 20,000 off,
So far, so good.
Stay at the slot machine.
You got more than that in your couch cushions at home.
No, I didn't see it this weekend.
Draft amendment to the curlers lease?
So the curlers have approached the county, that they don't know how the pandemic will impact their membership. So they approached the county, I think, in discussions with, our finance director. We thought one way to provide them some relief, there's two pieces here. One would be to forego the principal on the lease payment and then pay it out over the next 4 years. And then there is a portion, they make a payment every year of, it's currently $7,500. It was anticipated to go up by double that amount for maintenance, and what we discussed is potentially forgoing that and just pushing everything out 1 year. So this is just conceptual. We wanted to bring it to the committee today. Ultimately, this will have to go to Public Works Committee. It would have to come to this committee and be passed by the county board by a 2/3 vote, because we are in effect amending our budget. So we wanted to get this in front of you to see, number one, if it made sense. Number two, if there's something you like or don't like, and then how we might go back to the curlers and discuss this item.
So, okay, so 7,500 instead of going to 15, or 75, instead of going to 15,000, it stays there.
Yep.
I'm sorry, what about the rent, did you say? Is the rent staying the same or going down or up, or what, from last year?
It would go down, under the way this is prepared, we would allow them to forego the principal payment of $35,811.33, and then that would be split up in 4-year increments on the next 4 years.
Oh, okay, that's how much of it, okay.
Yep.
I was trying to make sure I got it straight, how much we were actually looking to reduce it, so that's quite a bit.
So a total reduction of just over $40,000 this year, but then, the goal would be to pay it out over the next, the principal would be.
I'm sorry, I just want to make this clear. So it's, right now, last year, they paid $35,800, whatever?
They paid, it's about $35,000 in principal and about $18,000 in interest.
Okay.
And they also paid in a separate fund, $7,500 for maintenance.
Which was gonna go up.
Right, and that goes up in 5-year intervals, obviously, as we would assume that the building would need more maintenance as it gets older.
Well, I guess without knowing what their actual membership is or all that, just off first, thoughts on it, is that the 7,500 leaves it the same, seems, fair.
Reasonable?
But the other part's pretty good, big break.
It is.
I mean, that's a huge
It is.
break, and
Yeah.
for them, we're reducing the rent.
Yeah, and the committee may say, well, we don't like that, let's do $20,000, or, we were just trying to find the principal piece seemed to be a logical piece to key in on.
So, when you say principal, does that mean the principal's gonna be, still have to be paid at some point down the future?
Yeah.
Still, okay. And I guess we don't need to talk.
So that'd be that 35, basically been almost $9,000 a year added on to the next 4 years.
It would go on in 21, 22, 23.
Through 24.
And
24.
It would be October 1st of 2024, it would be October 1st every year. The 8,900 would be added to their lease payment, but the rent payment now. We're not essentially, we're not just gonna give them money, they're still gonna pay it, we're just gonna,
Give them 4 years.
we're gonna defer the payment.
Yeah, absolutely, the county will be made whole, absolutely.
So
Each deferral, so,
Correct.
I'm sorry,
It's interest free, correct?
the deferral.
Yeah, we did not go through the effort of calculating the interest on those. We certainly could, if that's something that you would
Does it first go through Public Works?
First goes to Public Works, then comes back to this committee, because we have, Public Works has oversight of the fairgrounds, you have oversight of the budget, and then it has to go to county board, and it needs to be passed by 2/3 vote. Obviously, they're looking for some sort of relief. We certainly we don't want to subsidize them, we'd like to be made whole, but, I think in terms of, is that the right amount? I think this is a matter for.
I hate to be, I just feel like I'm being like, slow here or something. It's just, the terminology, I guess, is confusing me a little bit. Because it says the minimum rent payment schedule. And then it goes right into, will be told for 1 year so that the principal payment of $35,000.
Yeah.
So, let me make clear, so, there's a rent payment every year and there's a principal payment deal? I just, I'm a little confused.
This is what she scribbled.
She wrote, I don't know what that was.
My question is, so the curlers, they have a rent payment, and then they owe us money like a principal payment?
They have about $50,000 a year that they pay the county for the debt.
Okay.
That's the principal and interest payment on the money.
Above and beyond the
That's the money that, nope, that includes the $35,000, and then there's an interest payment, about $17,000 on that. So about $52,000, $53,000. That's interest and principal on the money that the county borrowed to construct the buildings. And then there's a separate maintenance fund as well. So this would say, this agreement would hold off the principal payment, we would still collect the interest payment, and then it would require that $35,000 be paid out over the next 4 years, starting in 2021.
Okay. But so then, we really don't have a rent payment from them? It's just.
It is their rent, basically their rent pays for the debt, and then when it's only 20 years of debt, and then it's a 50-year lease. So they continue to make, under the agreement, they continue to make payments, but the county's debt would be paid off.
Okay.
So yeah, the rent goes to make the debt payment.
Okay.
And then well, obviously, this is a lengthy agreement. They pay for all the electrical, et cetera, anytime they're in possession of the
So it's really
facility.
a rent payment, but we're just basing the rent based on what our payments are, okay, as a county. So theoretically, when our payments are done, then we're gonna have there's still
30 years of,
rent?
yeah. Well, you're watching it, so Jay came down to
Oh, thanks, Jay.
help us. Jay McMahon, County Finance Director, for those training. I'll be right back.
Point of order,
Yeah, probably till 2031.
You didn't go.
He told the clerk.
He didn't do it, I just be wondering.
He reported to the clerk, and I'll be right back.
Yeah, I did hear that.
Okay, that's good, thanks.
That clarifies it, right? Thanks, Jay. Thank you. Let the record show that Jay is leaving. Let the record show Jay's not leaving yet.
Well, you understand, it's like, the principal, so there's kind of a mixture of terms. I need to see that. So Jason, so that 7,500, we're talking about just 1 year, that's gonna be.
Correct.
Delayed, okay.
Correct.
Called me on this, 2 weeks ago and said, how do you think we could do this? Chris, It is a partnership, it isn't like it's just somebody out there in business.
Sure, no, I know, yeah. Well, I don't know if you recall,
Yeah.
that part of Rich, we were talking to them about having this building, place for us. They discussed that with us, they were leaving, Ozaki, and then, yeah, we had some serious talks about possibly building something, next to us, property. This, I'm just for all involved. Sorry, I know, almost being fun.
Yeah, it's just a discussion item, we just wanted to hear your thoughts. You say, I don't like it, then
Well, it seems fair, but like I said, we're just assuming that they really are having a big problem, they're afraid of it, or they've seen the drop.
I don't think they know, I think they don't know how it's gonna impact their membership. And I know they recently did a survey of them, but I don't know what,
Is it October night comes down, or when is it? I don't remember.
October 1st.
October 1st, correct? Yeah.
This is when they're done.
No, it comes on.
It comes on, correct, right, we don't use it in the summer.
Hard to know, yeah, uncharted territory, a lot of things.
I think my guess would be is that, their membership is probably gonna go up. If I see any correlation between what's happened with my business, you know, people are just looking for something to do, just to get out of the house. Yeah, I mean,
I kinda heard the same thing.
It is.
Yeah.
It's increasing because of people are just looking for more to do, and especially the size of that building. You can socially space in there real easy.
yeah, I would guess that.
I just wonder if we're setting a precedent on anything else. I mean, what if,
Other partnerships do we have?
Nothing as intricate as
well, I
this.
mean, I don't know, that's why I'm asking,
Yeah.
what about with like the, Egg Society or whatever that runs the fair, are they paying us rent? I mean, they could come along in 2 months and say, hey, you know, we didn't have the fair, we didn't make as much money as we usually do.
No,
I mean, could they ask for concessions or, you know, deferral of payment?
I don't know if another organization that makes the Sober House, yeah. Right, well, we gotta revisit that too, that's right.
We elected company will start.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Supervisor Wolf?
Thank you. It, kind of along the lines of what Supervisor Melitek is saying, it seems like an awful lot of deferral. As Jay just pointed out too, you know, they're paying these payments out of last year's revenue really, because the season kind of started in the fall or.
Normally, this payment would have been made. I thought it was July 1st in the okay.
October 1st.
Okay.
And November 1st for these two payments. So we're saying that ordinarily they would pay us about $60,000, correct, between the two different maintenance and principal and interest, a little bit more than $60,000, and we're talking about taking that down to 17. Which seems like a pretty incredible deferral, if you will. You know, that's not even like half. That's like 2/3, and it just seems like a lot. And it's unanticipated. They don't even know what it's going to really be. So I think we're going beyond what we should be doing here.
Got it. Well, I think full disclosure, when we initially looked at it, we thought that the interest, I think we had the interest in principal numbers. You wrote them wrong. So when I initially approached the curlers, I thought the 35 was actually 17. But then as yeah, they were transposed in one of the communications between Jay and myself. So it would have been about a little less than half, right, at 25,000, yeah.
That would seem to
But
me.
yeah, and you could make that number, like I said, it could be 20,000 because then it's an even.
Well, you know, another way you could do is not to defer the maintenance payment, so then you'd be up to 25,000, you know, still deferring, what is that, 35?
Yeah, there's all kinds of ways to do it, yep.
It just seems like we're way, on the maybe that they might have a bad year, but as you pointed out, they might have a great
Well,
year.
that was my
you know.
point I was
Yeah.
gonna make.
So-
Supervisor Cornick?
Yeah, what, that, I think we're putting the cart before the horse on this because,
You would know about that.
yeah, we know about that.
Which one goes first?
He was beating the dead horse before Thursday.
There are people who put the horse.
Not on the agenda.
That's another day. Anyhow.
Get that under public comment, maybe.
Was, like I said, our income has increased because of COVID,
Mhm.
all right? So their membership may increase, and we're planning on giving them a deferral because apparently they're fearful that their membership is gonna decline by quite a bit in order to do this. So I don't have a problem with giving them that deferral, but I would like to see the numbers come in first.
Well, my thought on the deferral, and my thought on the entire project is it's not just membership. It's these participations where other people come from other states and they come from other countries. Now, Bonspiel or whatever it's called, Bonspiel, you know, that's their major fundraisers, and I'm thinking that's where they're factoring in. That's true.
That could be.
Not just their membership
Then I
is all,
guess-
I believe their membership will pretty well stay the same. Because these people are in it for the long
If they
haul.
came back with that information that said they're worried about, you know.
Unfortunately, Supervisor Racy's not here because she's a member. She couldn't fill us in.
Of course not. But if she was here, we'd all be wearing masks, so that's not complaining.
Well, you know, and just one other thought is that the curlers, their number of, their expenses, what's their pretty much main expense is us, right? I mean, what are their expenses? The ice, they have. The linen. I mean, what is that all cost, just approximately? Okay, but we're still like 2/3 of their expense is us, right?
So, it's a draft, you know. Supervisor Wolf is gonna become in front of you.
Sure.
That probably works.
Yeah, and I think maybe we can talk about what you like and what you don't, yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, I think their membership numbers will remain strong, or might even increase. But I think what their concern is
Yeah.
their fundraiser, when they have the Bonspiel and getting groups, like I said, from other countries.
Yeah, and when they don't know if they'll have 5 sheets, if they're only gonna be able to do 2 sheets, or.
Right, these people, this is, you know, so maybe 3.
3 sheets
Okay.
and some wind.
Schedule of county board meetings, obviously we have,
What about the report? Did you do the report already? 7.
Administrator report, diversity.
well, under E, 6E, it says schedule of county board.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were skipping away to the next meeting date. My bad.
Schedule of county board meetings.
Trying to help.
Thanks, Shane. That's all right. That's all right.
So for sure, mid-month, this month's budget,
Yeah, mid-month budget.
October, mid-month budget. Is there something else?
Solar now?
Solar now is something that, you know, there's discussion about putting that solar installation. That's something that we will probably,
That might be a contentious.
I was gonna report on that.
so that I think that, what's that?
I was thinking of scheduling that mid-September.
Mid-September, if the primary
For solar?
are available, yes.
Okay.
I think Supervisor Wolf and I attended the training that the sheriff put on implicit bias training, and the trainer of that has expressed some willingness to maybe attend a mid-month meeting, as well. And I've reached out to, Bridge the Divide, and they might be also able to present. So that's something that we may look at for October. And I've been working with, well, it's kind of getting into the next item, but, I I can report on that too. I've been working with University Extension, so we may be able to do something there on the diversity and inclusion. There's a discussion on that with the board at the October mid-month meeting, so.
And also, Marty, for your information, when we adjourn our county board meeting on the first Wednesday, we go into budget hearings. Oh, you were there already, right? Not up at front, but I mean, you attended some, right? So did anybody schedule any vacations for the first Wednesday of October?
Especially the chairman.
Yeah. Especially the chairman.
Okay, what's that Monday? I've got jury duty, like.
Monday,
October second.
October 5th is Monday.
Oh, okay, good, I go to like
That-
October 2nd, all right.
Okay, October 5th is a 1 o'clock meeting.
I can't.
That meeting begins at 1 o'clock. Are you listening?
Yes, I'm sorry.
That meeting begins at 1 o'clock because you meet with the nonprofits and the grant organization, or whatever you,
Yeah.
nonprofits, whatever.
Yeah, so OED and Milwaukee 7 and Flag Day.
That's right.
And March 7th.
Yeah, and then you have your regular meeting after that. As a matter of fact,
And you'll have the public hearing as well that day, won't
You'll
you?
have lunch too, right?
Oh, is that the 28th?
This is October 5th, which is your actual
thinking
next
November.
meeting. You don't have a meeting now between now and October 5th. And it starts at 1 o'clock, you meet with the nonprofits, and then your regular meeting is at 3 o'clock, whatever your regular meeting would entail. And then you'll meet on Wednesday, the 7th, October 7th, scheduled for 11 o'clock or right after county board.
Box lunch.
And then the 8th, the Thursday, the 8th, is at 9 o'clock, your meeting starts, and it goes until it ends.
Starting at 8 AM?
Starts at 9. You certainly can change that, but that
Oh,
meeting
9.
goes as long as it's gonna take you to
Are we gonna get
get this budget done.
some sort of email about these dates?
Geez, I think I gave that out to you at the first of the year, but I can redo it again.
First of the year.
You get you get to schedule the first of the year.
Well, that's been deleted
So-
already.
It has all the committee dates on it. I can see that you get it.
So Julie, how long does that meeting on Wednesday the 7th at 11 o'clock last?
That'll go till 5.
So about 5.
Yeah, maybe 4.
It just depends.
The next day is usually 9 to 2 or 3.
Well, we've only done that one time, so, yeah, we don't do a Friday meeting anymore, so if it would be something that would have to go really long, we would be staying long.
And we have lunch those days too, so.
Bran muffins
Not a box lunch.
on our Supervisor Warren stump.
No lunch business here.
No, you don't want yours in a box?
We've got
And then
some
November 2nd,
photos and-
Monday night is the public hearing at 7 o'clock for the budget.
Very well attended by the public.
Only if tax increase.
Right. Okay, we got that done. You wanna continue on a little discussion on diversity, what you started before?
Sure, I've been working with the University Extension Office of Access, Inclusion, and Compliance. I'm working with Karina Ward, and, we're working on some strategies to better engage some of the target audiences in the community. Although I think she's out of the office on a vacation currently, we'll have another follow-up with our community partners. And Extension has a nice template that they use to develop action plans in the community. They've also, the Office of Access, Inclusion, and Compliance is working on developing a county curriculum that we can use internally. So internally, our training continues. I touched a little bit about the implicit bias training that Supervisor Wolf and myself attended. That was the one that the sheriff planned for and scheduled. That has been attended by all law enforcement agencies in the county. Human Resources is working on a countywide effort and is also leading the policy review by our legal team provided by our insurer. Human Services has a specific training effort ongoing in their department. I think we talked a little bit about, we may use a mid-month meeting for discussion on some of these issues. University Extension has a sort of a planning and demographic analysis of the county that has a mapping exercise piece that's available. Touched a little bit about the implicit bias training, and then I also have a meeting with representatives from Bridge to the Divide to see how they, and they're the group from Cedarburg, they're a local organization that's engaged in these efforts. So we'll see what they can bring to the table. I think, you know, we'll maybe following the discussion, the mid-month discussion, we could talk about what we do in terms of you know, do we need a committee? Should we have a standalone committee? You know, because I think there's issues that the finance committee will have to deal with in terms of the personnel side. I think there's probably some access and other issues, public issues that are probably better dealt with human services and with public health. You know, there's a law enforcement piece that the public safety committee can oversee. So I think, you know, we're still gathering some information in that area. So that's the update there.
Revolving loan fund?
We're still working, you know, there's a revolving loan fund money available. I think it's re-sparked some of the discussion about a CBRF development at the Losada campus. I don't know if that's something that Supervisor Geraci is still very interested in. They also have a few projects that are eligible out there. We have other projects, so the money needs to be expended on ADA projects. One potential one might be, you know, this room itself isn't ADA compliant because there's no way to get to a restroom conveniently from here. So we're getting information on that, and I think the Parks Department has a few ADA issues that, you know, so we'll gather all that information, run it past our partners at the state of Wisconsin to kind of see what fits and what doesn't fit, and then we'll bring it back to this committee for discussion.
So, let's say they have, well, pick a number. So then, if this room isn't compliant and they need to build an extensive ramp there or whatever, so then we put that request in, we get that money, then we pay it back, or how does that work?
Yeah, you would basically so you're kind of supplanting a project that you already have, you know, identified. So instead of expending the county money on it, you expend the revolving loan fund reserve funds on it.
So then we pay that back at a low interest rate, or?
It's our money.
It's our money, so it's not that's what
The other decision point is what we do with the revolving loans that we still have, yeah, but there's also the loans, you know, there's a number of businesses that have loans. The county can transfer them, so there's one of two ways. We can transfer those to the state of Wisconsin, let the state of Wisconsin deal with business owners on an individual basis, or we could take funds of our own money and pay off those loans for the state and then assume it, yeah, so.
Can I just say one thing on that? Those loans, like, a couple of them are like a year past due, or quite a bit.
I think there's only one that might be currently in arrears. Yep.
So, I mean, I know we don't have to do anything necessarily with Kathleen or anyone.
Yeah, we follow up with them on a regular basis, right? Yeah. Now, if we assume the revolving loan fund program, then obviously we'd be assuming some of the risk on those loans as well.
As far as that decision goes, I mean, it doesn't feel like there's a lot of positive for us for assuming that. Is there? I mean, if we assume we're going to be getting the money put in our
yeah, I think the only positive would be you could create your own revolving loan program with the payments you would receive, right?
I mean, there's like $700,000, is it, or something?
Yeah.
So if we tell the state to take it, then we just wash our hands, we get zero, and they take those people?
We still can use the balance to do a project, but it would just be the outstanding loans that would be shifted to the state of Wisconsin.
But if we keep them, we collect outstanding loans over the course of time with that money.
But we also have to pay out the balance on all.
give them.
Pay the state.
We'd have to pay
Right,
them that.
yeah, this, yeah.
So we'd get the interest, would be the only thing we'd gain is the interest on it.
Correct,
And
yeah.
the risk.
And, yeah.
That's the negative part.
I was just gonna look to see what the,
Probably wouldn't want.
Because we're pretty far down on the totem pole.
Yeah, we probably wouldn't need to do that.
yeah, we're not in a good position if there was a default, that's for sure.
Low totem, high risk.
Yeah, I warned about some of those way back.
50, 70, 100, 150, 200. So there's about about $250,000, give or take, of principal outstanding, so.
So that wouldn't be much money.
No, I think, yeah, probably should look this at, yeah, the state.
Return to sender. Committee report, Supervisor Wolf.
Yeah, I just wanted to let the executive board know that we did move the Solar Now issue from an action item to a discussion item at our last meeting, prior to the meeting, so we had a discussion, we had public there. This is the Energy Action Commission unanimously voted to approve the program without being site-specific. Well, the whole thing apparently hinges on it going at this site, which is at the Mequon Park. Some of the neighbors expressed their opposition to that, and, you know, we are mulling that over and whatnot. It's going to come to a vote at our next meeting, which would be the day after our mid-month September meeting here in a couple of weeks. I think it'll be, well, we'll see. We'll see what the outcome is. But I just wanted you to know there will be, if it does pass, I'm sure there'll be continuing opposition to that installation there. One of the ideas, and I was going to get together with Administrator Zwindell about this, one of the ideas is that some of the revenue, that this generates about $42,000 worth of revenue for 20 years to the county, that some of the revenue, since it's giving up some parkland, which really isn't being used for parkland other than a private park for the local residents right there, that some of the revenue could be directed toward park improvements elsewhere. So that by using parkland, and Andrew and I have been playing phone tag for a week and a half here, he was out on vacation, but I want to talk with him about the use of, what he thinks about the use of parkland. But one of the ideas is, okay, if we're going to get $42,000 worth of revenue, let's take half of that, and that would be earmarked for park improvements elsewhere. And seemed like a reasonable trade-off. So, you know, that's what we're looking at, but I just wanted to alert you that this is coming up, and it could be somewhat volatile with some strong feelings locally.
Can I just ask a question? So, just from what I've read, so are we talking, these solar panels are like, I understand, they're like 50 feet away from any property, outside property?
Oh, more than that.
Yeah.
I think, I don't think I have it up anymore.
We should probably,
Oh, that would
100 to 500 feet.
we should probably limit our debate on this one. Yeah,
We can talk about it.
yeah. Just because the neighbors are obviously they're very invested and very interested, and we don't want to cause ourselves any issues.
Yeah, we can forget that question.
That they put a bunch up on. If people want to see what it looks like.
There's one right by the Family Enrichment Center too in Grafton. They have a 4 or 5 panel array.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
What
Okay.
are you talking about? I ran across it one day.
Huge.
Yeah, it's huge.
It's huge. It goes for.
Who is that
maybe
now?
a quarter mile.
Where is this?
In Mequon, you go over the railroad tracks.
Yeah, you go over the railroad tracks, it's the first stoplight, you take a left and you have to go down about a mile. And then it's an
Goes
industrial.
on Bear Road?
What's that?
Is it on Bear Road there?
No.
Eh.
Maybe.
Oh, okay.
Rockwell?
Yeah, I think it's Rockwell. I think it's Rockwell.
Yes.
Mequon Road.
Yeah. So you just take a left and you gotta go down a ways, and there's an industrial park down there, and they have just a whole ton of.
I think that's on Bear Road, yeah.
Right where they're building